I'm the Rogue Thread. Hear me rant. Yes, I'm going to talk about why you should vote for somebody and not against somebody. This kind of spurs because of the American elections, and everyone was just kind of voting for nobody, really. They were just voting against someone. And voting against someone can lead to many problems. I know, some of you are probably thinking, Rogue, how do you understand our plight? There was no good candidate to vote for. It was all terrible. Well, let's get into that. In 2015, there was both a provincial and a federal election. Both of these elections were within 5 months of each other. And it really started to weigh on me, hearing the campaigning for both provincial and federal government everywhere. It was rather unfortunate. It made me hate government. It made me hate everything that democracy was, and I started to feel like people weren't smart enough to vote, and that maybe something like Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan was the best way to go, which is kind of horrible, but it's something that you should at least entertain, just for thought process sake. Understand how other people think. I mean, even you Americans will know how our Canadian election turned out. We have the man, Justin Trudeau, who discusses whether fart is an offensive word or not in council, which is just plain ridiculous. But I already had lost hope by the time the federal election came around. The provincial one was the worst. It was rather unfortunate because the Conservative government, which was currently leading the province, had a premier that had done a lot of embezzlement. I almost think she should have gone to prison for what she had done, because she basically made a penthouse loft, had planned to make a penthouse loft in a new government building. This penthouse loft was for her family so that they could stay closer to her work so she could spend more time with her family. What? Half an hour of a drive is not very far. You don't need to live inside of a building downtown and cost taxpayers millions of dollars just so that you can live in a penthouse in a government building. No, that is not how you spend taxpayers' money. And this caused taxpayers to lose faith, along with a few other incidents of what she had done. She had taken her family on private flights to certain places using taxpayer dollars. All sorts of really shady things, we'll put it that way. But since the people had lost faith in her, they lost faith in the entire party, who had been running the government for an extremely long time, which creates a lot of problems, as in the opposition can no longer run a government because they have no one with experience. The leader of the Conservatives was then kicked out of the party, of course, and the person to replace her was Jim Prentice. And he was very honest, maybe too honest. He was a smart person, but he didn't know how to word things to the public very well. And when addressed on how people could find the solutions to our province's problems, he said, "Look in the mirror." Not with that tone, but it brought across a message that was very negative. So you can see where the people were thinking that they were the ones blamed for all of the problems that the government had rightfully caused a lot of. And so this led to anyone taking jabs at the Conservative Party to be in favor with the public, which is quite problematic considering that one of the opposition was very good at that. The opposition in question is the NDP party, and the person who was very good at slandering people was Rachel Notley. She's very argumentative and was very disrespectful in all of the debates that happened. I actually couldn't watch them because she was just interrupting everybody. She destroyed the flow. The moderator kept telling her to be quiet while somebody was answering a question. That is blatantly disrespectful and not something I want to see in a politician. What if you're talking to somebody from another country and you essentially just keep cutting them off, disrespecting them. I don't want to see that in my political leaders. I want to see somebody who at least wants to try to work with other nations, try and be persuasive and not bully them into a certain opinion. However, since people had been very disillusioned with the Conservative Party, the constant slamming of them had won the NDP the election. They are now the majority government in Alberta. Fast forward to today, the third day in which the carbon tax was implemented. One of the NDP's brilliant plans to spur the economy, which is based off of oil sands here, if you had not heard of them because of Leonardo DiCaprio flying his private jet up here to bitch us out about our oil sands and how environmentally unfriendly we are. I decided to look into the large changes that the NDP had made in the past year and a half, just to see if my annoyance with them, well, more than annoyance, was justified. The main points where I disagreed with the government were in their handling of the budget, their handling of the carbon tax, and their inclusion of a ministry for the status of women in the government. No, this does not mean I am a woman hater, but there are some issues with it. One line that the media took after the NDP had released their budget was actually from Jim Prentice during the debate, where he says, "I know math is difficult." Though the quote was taken completely out of context, it did fit the bill quite well. The NDP were still running a deficit, something that they tried to skewer the Conservatives over during the election, and they did introduce new taxes. The most notable increase in taxes in Alberta was to be the carbon tax, which would tax anything that used gasoline and any sort of fossil fuels. The public was very much against this because no public really likes taxes. And to sway people's opinion on this, Notley ran a $9 million propaganda campaign about how the carbon tax would actually help 2/3 of Albertans, which, bullshit it would. If it's going to help 2/3 of Albertans, that'd be a massive amount of tax money that they would have to collect. Not to mention the economic effect that it will have on Albertans, especially in the way that everywhere needs to use fossil fuels. That's how we ship goods. That's how we keep refrigerators cool to keep food. It does a lot of things. So, it will increase the cost of just about any product. In response to criticisms of the carbon tax, Rachel Notley actually stated that it's not a question of having a more fuel-efficient vehicle. It could sometimes be a question of taking the bus, walking, those kinds of things. This way of thinking is absolutely ignorant of what Alberta is. Alberta has a lot of rural area, a lot of farmers. That is actually our second highest industry, is in meat. We have our beef sold just about everywhere in the world as AAA grade. Strangely enough, it sounds like she wants farmers to stop using their tractors and hand plow the fields. You do see how ridiculous this is. Since Alberta is so spread out, we do need vehicles to get around from place to place. And if you're saying it's not just getting a more fuel-efficient vehicle, and it's taking the bus or walking, well, I'll take myself as an example. I live not terribly far out of the city. And for me, it's an hour walk to the closest bus. Our transit is an absolute disaster. There's not enough coverage where there is ample population to have a transit service there. Our train was made haphazardly, so it doesn't go very many places. I do admit that this is not a failing of the provincial government, but it is a fail of the city planners. But the provincial government does need to take that into account when they're saying, okay, we need to figure out how to make this carbon tax thing work. Maybe we could tax it only on certain things, or make it a very small amount, or do something like that. In the meantime, to save money, perhaps I'll just walk to the bus for an hour in minus 20 degrees Celsius, which happens to be minus 4 Fahrenheit. That's kind of a reasonably common temperature in the winter here. I don't think I'm going to do that. Well, if I'm not going to take the bus, then I'm going to have to walk to school, which is 18.3 kilometers away from where I live. That happens to be 11.3 miles for all you Americans and Brits. Yeah, I'm not walking that far in minus 20. No way in hell. And not only is this government disconnected from its people, but it's also disconnected from the people who work directly for them, the government employees. They decided that they needed to make a ministry for the status of women in the Alberta government. The Alberta government actually hires to a certain policy in which your years of experience, education, whether you meet the requirements for the job or not, and your position actually affect your salary. Not negotiations, not whether you're male or female, not whether you're of a certain race. So I see the Ministry of the Status of Women in Government as slightly redundant. A system that actually mitigated a lot of these things was already in place, and you could go to any sort of HR department and say, I'm being treated unfairly, and I believe it's because I am a woman of a certain race, of a certain belief, of something, and they would absolutely do something about it. But to me, it all comes back down to the budget. If you have enough money to make a department of the status of women, then you should not be running a deficit, because that is already not a problem in the government. And if someone were to complain that there aren't enough women in high positions in the government, I would definitely say take a look at the actual list of people whose salary are published because the public wanted to make that known. This was during the Conservatives, so it has nothing to do with that, but you could actually see the highest ranking people in the government, and if they make over a certain amount of money. All of these really render the Ministry of the Status of Women redundant. And why are we paying people to do redundant things, to do something that is already being done and already has policies in effect? Also, creating this ministry cost money. People had to plan it out. People had to do paperwork. People had to sit and wait for the paperwork to be filed by other people. And you've been paying people wages to do something completely redundant and useless. It doesn't make anything any faster. In fact, it just makes things slower. More decisions are going to have to be made with the approval of this ministry, and it's very unneeded bureaucracy that was just pandering to a certain group of people. To wrap this video up, I'll discuss what the look in the mirror quote actually was about. The quote goes, well, we all only need look in the mirror. It's basically all of us have had the best of everything and have not had to pay for what it costs. This was said by Jim Prentice. The quote was really directed to all Albertans, and those include government officials and government members. What he was saying is we all need to be a part of the solution, and that we technically all are part of the problem. There were Albertans who were living off of the success of the oil industry, and living paycheck to paycheck and racking up debt, and their lifestyle was very unsustainable. And then the government had spent the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund in a rather short period of time, which was largely caused by the government using oil prices that were very high, and they started to depend on oil to run the province, and not just to fill the trust fund for when a large recession happened. But I do believe that we the people are partially responsible for thinking of ideas and potentially bringing them to the government and saying, hey, this is how we can prosper more. There are people who need to be hired, like economists and people like that, who will understand how this works and not just say yes to the people in government, or not just give them something that they want to hear. Just give them the facts and what they need to know to run the province. That being said, it's good to be back. I did take a break over the holidays for not just the holidays, but I had a few things happen before the holidays that needed more of my processing power than I really could handle while making videos. I apologize. But hey, if you liked what you saw today, subscribe, of course. And that's all. I mean, comment below if you have any comments. But since likes don't matter, fuck likes. You can just leave all no, don't leave dislikes. That actually is included in the algorithm. So confusing. And as always, have a great day.